Happy Monday. Welcome back to some conversation about finding God with us in the midst of life. And what a Monday it is here in Louisiana, right? Last Friday, our governor here in Louisiana relaxed the stay-at-home order. And that meant for many of us, this weekend perhaps gave you a little ray of hope. For many of us, perhaps this weekend felt a little bit like life used to feel before COVID-19. Perhaps there was the opportunity to get out of the house and to just enjoy spending time with other people with social distancing. For many of us, it was a time to just catch up on some things that we haven't been able to do. For many of us, it was an opportunity to do some of the more important things in life, right? Like go to Mass, whether that Mass was outside or whether that Mass was inside a church. And even though it felt different with masks and social distancing and having to sanitize hands, for many of us, it just felt good to receive the Eucharist. And there's a ray of hope that is in our lives right now that maybe we're returning back to normal. This week, I want to talk about 5 things that I think are critically important for us if we are going to move into this week with God. 5 things that are critically important if we are going to let God lead us in this next chapter in the story of all things COVID-19. And the first thing that I want to talk about today is not losing what we received during those last 2 months. Again, today I want to talk about the you might say the most important thing of these 5 things this week is not losing what we have received from God during these last 2 months. There's going to be a temptation in all of our lives because we have been so wanting life to return back to normal, for us to either feel like we have to accelerate the return back to normal. We can't wait to get back there. So it can feel like an inner rush, or it can feel like an impatience, or it can feel like I just want to get back to, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen gradually. And as our attention interiorly can be so focused on getting back to what was, it's going to be a temptation for us to forget what God did in our lives in the past 2 months. Now, none of us have had a pure experience of COVID-19. What do I mean by that? None of us have had either only blessings, and believe it or not, trust me here, none of us have had only struggle. Every one of us, if we have the courage to look deep within, has probably had an ebb and flow, a combination of blessings in our life as well as struggle. At some point in the future, if you have the courage with the Lord to look back on COVID-19, perhaps you'll even learn from the struggles. There are blessings kind of packaged in a lot of the struggles in our life. And what happens usually as we look back on life, we're able to, now that we're out of the struggle, we're able to glean a little bit of some of the personal growth that we experienced or some of the reasons why we were struggling. Spiritual maturity in general, is being able to learn from our mistakes and to learn from the struggles. And so I just want to acknowledge right off the bat that a lot of us have struggled in the last 2 months. However, every one of us has experienced some form of blessing. Many of us have slowed down. I've had conversations with countless people who've just talked about the fact that the pace of life has slowed down a little bit. And many of us have talked about the reality of reconnecting with family, and that hasn't been pure either. There's been ups and downs with families. Many of us have done practical things like having game night at the house or having dinner together as a family, a more intentional conversation. And every one of us knows that sometimes that's been really blessed and sometimes that hasn't had the same fervor, you might say, or experience that it has in other times, but that's okay too. Many of us have reconnected with God. Many of us have exercised a little bit more. Many of us have reestablished a rhythm of life. Whatever it is, if we have the courage to look back on our lives, we will all be able to recognize that since the middle of March, we have experienced some of the blessings in our life. Now, if I were your spiritual director, if I were kind of sitting right across from you, this is what I would say to you. There's going to be a temptation for us to want to hurry into what life could look like in the next couple months and leave behind some of those blessings. A couple practical examples. Let's say that for some of us, you've been able to slow down a little bit in this season of COVID-19. That this stay-at-home order has actually given you a structure to live in, and that structure has slowed down life a little bit. You haven't been able to do X, Y, or Z, and so you haven't had to do X, Y, and Z, right? For many of us, life has slowed down a little bit. Maybe there have been less distractions because there's less opportunity to do the things that actually were distractions to us enjoying our rhythm of life. So in this example, for many of us, if life slowed down a little bit, here's what I'm predicting is going to happen in all of our lives. I'm predicting you're going to feel a temptation to speed life up a little bit, right? Even look back on this past weekend. For many of us, as the stay-at-home order was lifted, did you feel interiorly the same sense of pace that you did before the stay-at-home order was lifted? In other words, whenever life gives you new opportunities, it threatens a sense of discerned pace that a lot of us were living with, that for many of us was actually the source of blessing. And as we go forward, being able to do all the things that we used to do in time, and as we go forward into the summer, many of us are going to feel a temptation to forget about the pace with which we were living our lives. Let me give you another temptation that I think is coming for many of us. A lot of families have rediscovered relationships with each other. They've reconnected around the dinner table, or they have had intentional conversation with each other. Whether you are living with your family, or whether you've been able to do that over the phone or even Zoom, whatever the incarnational way of reconnecting with your family has looked like, that's because a lot of us didn't have the freedom to do other things that often prevent us from being present to our families. Well, here's the temptation that's going to come. As we inch into a semblance of what life used to look like, being able to maybe do some of the things we used to do, there's going to be the temptation to now include things in our life that are going to compete with the very relationships that were restored during COVID-19. So for married couples who have spent more time together, are they still going to spend the same amount of time as we don't have the stay-at-home order as they did when we did have the stay-at-home order? Are we still going to hold on to the things like spending time with each other as a family, or having intentional conversations, when we now have the opportunity to perhaps to do many other things that are going to perhaps compete with that? So it's critically important as we move forward together that we don't forget the things that God did for us. We can't lose the things that we have received, you might say. So what are 3 practical things that you can do even today or tomorrow that might help you move forward into a new chapter of the story, that might help you hold on to the things that God did? Number 1, write them down. Right? Just spend a couple of minutes and just reflect back on the last 2 months. What has God done in your life? What are some of the blessings that you've experienced? How have you grown personally? If you haven't written those things down, write them down. Number 2, put them somewhere where you can see them, like in your mirror in the bathroom, or in your car, or on the refrigerator, or wherever it is that you look. Put them on your phone. Put them on the desktop of your computer. Some place where you're going to be able to see those things repeatedly through the day. If we can see those things, they stay in our consciousness, right? And then number 3, tell somebody that you love about the things that you don't want to lose as you move forward in life. God gave us a gift. not in COVID-19, but during that season. And for us to return back to a way of living that is without the gift actually says something to God about our gratitude for the gift, or it says something to God about what we think about the gift and value the gift when we perhaps we're going to move on to other things that we think are going to make us happier than those gifts that God gave us. 3 things that we can do as we keep the graces in front of us, right? Write them down, put them in front of you so you can see them, and ask someone to hold you accountable to it. There are 5 things that we can do this week that are critically important as we move forward. Looking forward to unpacking the rest of those with you as the week unfolds. As this week does unfold, let's stay close to the Lord and let Him lead us. And until we have our conversation tomorrow, God bless you.